Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another Wednesday review. And today I will be reviewing the debut full-length album from this pretty new to me Mexican heavy metal band, Xtabay, which is their name. The album, of course, being in their native language, but I will which is it, Crónicas Siniestras? I butchered that, but apparently it translates to Sinister Chronicles. So there we go. Again, I just at least told you it's basically it's English translation, but the album, of course, was digitally or at least independently released digitally on May 26th of this year. So that's all great. Again, Xtabay, like I told you, they're actually based out of Veracruz, Mexico, and they were formed all the way back in 2015, and they released their debut demo, which was self-titled, in 2017, and here we are, of course, with this year, with their debut full-length album, which is basically for English translation, Sinister Chronicles. So without further ado, let me get into my thoughts on this debut album from this Hispanic or Mexican heavy metal band, Xtabay. Let me get into it. Alright, so before we get into any of my thoughts on this particular album, you know what I have to do? I have to at least to read you all basically the track listing, do a track listing rundown so I can read you all the songs on this album, how many songs are on this album, and what's the time length for this album. And since we have at least about 9 songs here, it all clocks in at the length of 53 minutes and 35 seconds. So these 9 songs are, most of them are basically at least titled in their native language of Mexican. Basically, you know, it's Hispanic. And me, I don't fucking know. I can't really speak that language to begin with. Even if I tried, it would be half-assed, and it would be almost an insult to them, and I don't want to come off as almost racist. So the only professional thing for me to do is basically read you at least the English translations for these songs, because it's easier for me to read off of, and at least there, and it will give you a better idea on what these songs are about. So let's definitely begin with the very first track, which is a 1 minute and 43 intro, which is titled Nocturnal. It's actually the only song on here that's actually has already a easy English name to it. But that's what it begins with, and it of course goes to songs like 11 O'Clock, The Legend of the Charro Negro, which is what's titled, My Goddess, On the Other Side of the Night, The Devil's Pied Piper, Happily Ever After, At 12 Chimes, and finally ending with the title track, which is the longest song on the album. It basically clocks in at 13 minutes and 56 seconds. So there's your 9 songs, which again were all read to you in their English translations, but you do have at least see their actual native translations, basically their original titles in Mexican. So there you go. All right, so where do we really begin with this album? Before I really get into the actual just overall feel and just the actual honest thoughts of this album, I'll have to read you this sort of write-up on Metal Archives. So, actually, apparently they said they were formed in August of 2014, even though apparently they state 2015. So, I guess there's a little miscommunication there, because they're idiots over on the Metal Archives. Most of them are. They just hot shot. Still, let me just read basically the write-up here. So let's definitely move on with it. Again, they were formed with influences of classical and folk music from different cultures, inspired by, of course, the magic of both national and international oral tradition. So each song based on this album basically tries to tell a story, but they're also just alone because of taking their obviously just their own sort of sounds again that's native to them, just the very that almost Hispanic kind of feel that you really expect from at least just the overall sounds of Mexico, but basically just blended in with, of course, the sort of European styles of heavy metal, basically, and hard rock. At times can be a little bit very, even on times bordering on progressive rock at times, because if you can tell, there might be a little bit inspired by the likes of Jethro Tull on some of the sound, and at times even Iron Maiden. But there's definitely some of that, that almost British metal influence, but just combined with the sort of native sounds and just overall influences and lyrical content is the best way to summon up this album from Xtabay, because you get plenty of that. Everything just has its own sort of unique feel. Each song does have its own native feel. You really can feel it most of the times. Everything has some very interesting compositions too. Again, there's at least 3 songs in this album that actually uses the flute as solos, so which again might draw influences from Jethro Tull for that example. I mean, the song "The Dark Ages" off of Stormwatch is probably the best song that might have give you the idea that instrument could actually work in a real harder and heavier sort of atmosphere. And it really is played out on this album, where especially on songs like the Devil's Pied Piper, and of course the title track, they all definitely seem to really have they really play with the sort of just combining flute with sort of really almost speedy, very almost power metal like structuring as again solos instead of just guitar solos and just trading off. So interesting, but you do get that very just traditional Mexican almost atmosphere combined with it. Just really gives it it makes it sound interesting, especially within like the more softer songs, especially when it really is the sort of time changes where it kind of breaks a little more moodier parts within some of the songs, especially some of the longer ones, especially even the fucking flute also makes its appearance again in the title track, which is the longest song on this one. Because again, it's actually one of the crown jewels for this album. It is one of the centerpieces for this album. Is the final track on the album, the title track. Because again, it clocks in at 13 minutes and 56 seconds, and it is the absolute centerpiece of this album. And of course the song that it ends the album. I know normally the centerpieces sometimes you might theoretically think would be in the center of the album, but sometimes the centerpieces also means for certain songs, and this one is probably the biggest centerpiece because it is the longest song, and it's definitely the one that has one of the more drawn out feel going on to it, and I mean that in an overall best way, because of it is definitely one of the it's so finely composed. It's executed well. It definitely keeps you interested. You're obviously just enthralled by the overall performance of the band and just the overall story arc or whatever. Even if it is being sung in their native language, it still somehow works within the song's advantage, and you can tell that just from the overall performance of at least the singer and just the overall band. They're really telling a story here with each of their songs. It's all great. It's all cool. Of course, I know I'm overlooking it, but I will just shortly talk about it. But the beginning track, Nocturnal, it's basically a very kind of intimidating spoken word intro with a very deep voice. But it's of course in Hispanic language, and it's so interesting, but you can tell it's a way to kind of build into of course the actual track on the album, 11 O'Clock. So again, with the sounds of crackling fire in the back, you can tell that he's probably either saying this over either fucking fire or just a god damn it, almost like a campfire, I guess you can say, maybe in the forest at night, just speaking this. Just the way the tone of his voice. You can tell that he's either, or it's probably over or the fireplace in the home, basically, with the lights turned off, and just probably just speaking this, and probably just on the chair sitting down, just so calmly, while still someone coming up very sinister and dark, maybe with the book in his hand. You know, that kind of atmosphere. That's the way I kind of feel when I'm listening to this intro. This spoken word intro going into the first track. Which again, it lasts for at least 1 minute and 43 seconds, but it's still intimidating, and it works as a good sort of taster for the actual, just overall tone of the album in terms of just, since each song tells its own stories, I can just imagine that our storyteller here has to have at least some sort of book in hand while reading this, to at least the person who's probably listening who just put this album on and is being like, whoa, it's time for it's time for a dark storytelling time, you know, that kind of shit. So it's all cool and all, but there you go. That's the best way I can sum it up this album. It's all greatly. Some songs are long, but they're not overly long. Not as long as the last track, but they all just have their own unique atmosphere. Everything's just played well. Everything's composed greatly. There's nothing bad on here, so I think it's a solid album from start to finish. So there you go. There's my overall thoughts on the debut album from the Mexican heavy metal band Xtabay, and my rating, since I wrote it down, I'm giving it a 8.35 out of 10. I think it's a very solid and very enjoyable album from these guys. I'll probably, since this has been released digitally, since I know some of you might be interested in checking this album out, and I know you definitely won't want to hear me at least recommend it to you and probably tell you where you can find and maybe listen to this album, but since it's already released digitally, I don't know when it will be released physically, if it has a physical release. If it has, it's probably either, most of the time, will probably be sold at least the band shows there when they're playing, you know, at the merch booth. So maybe it does have a physical release, but really, I think in the end of the day, since it's probably only been released digitally, and there's not even a Bandcamp page apparently for this thing, though there could be. You'll probably end up finding the goddamn Bandcamp page in the description box, but there's a very good chance that there isn't. So the only best way I can do is point you to, of course, the direction of the New Wave or Traditional Heavy Metal Full Albums channel on YouTube, and you will find it within the uploads over on that channel. And since that's how I found out about this album anyways, was through, of course, this channel. So there you go. Hope all of you enjoyed. This is Every Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.